Hello, I'm Deborah Malone, founder of The Internationalist and host of Internationalist Marketing TV. Today's guests are author Tim Love and statesman, former House Speaker Richard Gephardt. I am just so honored today to be welcoming both Tim Love, who is certainly an industry stalwart, and a very special guest, Dick Gephardt, who I think most of America knows has had an illustrious career in politics. We're talking about Tim's new book, of which Dick Gephardt did an introduction. But one of the things that impresses me the most is that these two gentlemen have given their whole careers to their industry, and they continue with great passion to keep trying to do their best to do good for the people of the world, quite frankly. So with that, let me welcome you both. Welcome once again, Tim, and a very warm welcome to you, Dick.
Thanks,
Great to
Deborah.
be with you. Thank you.
Such a pleasure, such a pleasure. Well, with that, let me just start with Tim first, as the medium in the mirror is his new book. So clearly, Tim, you are sharing some echoes of Marshall McLuhan and his famous phrase, "The medium is the message." So, what inspired that twist with the mirror, and how does it connect with your earlier work?
Well, I've always been a fan of McLuhan and read all his books in the 60s and 70s. And the idea of the medium is the message, which was a big thing that he advocated, was really to make us all more aware of the effect that the media that we use has on society and individuals, whether it's television or print or radio, that it's important to consider the effects that the media has, even beyond the content that the media delivers. He also had a point of view on content, which I thought was interesting, and I've carried with me my whole career, which is he said that content is the juicy piece of meat used by the burglar to distract the burglar to distract the watchdog of your mind. And those two things coming together right now with the internet have intrigued me over the last 8 years. I started this project Discovering Truth, trying to figure out how do people discern truth. And it came about because of all the talk about fake news and journalists being enemies of the people and stuff like that. And it worried me because I thought that language and that kind of point of view is dangerous. So I've been studying the subject of truth and the effect of this new media and the effect of the content from this new media. And the new book is really making some conclusions about this that I can be more assertive about it this time, based on talking with experts in the industry through the podcast series that we did, and 58 different episodes with media experts and various marketing and advertising experts. And I thought that having the advertising point of view on this was very important, both for the advertising industry, but also for consumers, because advertising is about the art and science of persuasion. And to look at media and the content that we're getting today and to question what kind of persuasion is going on has led me to the conclusion that the medium that is the internet is taking us to a different place than just being a message itself. The medium that we have is actually identifying our identity and our own inner experiences and interests, because the digital media is one-on-one and it is able to read what your interests are. You're able to use it to explore ideas and to find what you think is truth. And it's become a mirror to our children and a mirror to people. So I want people to be more aware that the material they're seeing is actually a reflection of themselves. And it makes finding truth more challenging than it's ever been, which I believe is causing us to have a reformation today over truth. And I think that reformation is every bit as important, maybe more prolific than the original Reformation in the 15th, 16th century that happened with the printing press, because we're undergoing significant changes, and people are distrusting media. We have lots of research on that, and what I'm most concerned about is the effect that this is having on children. And as you know, there's been a lot more activity and things written about this of late, and it's not going away. So this is a challenge, and I hope my book will shed some light on this idea of how this content is affecting people.
I think you make a good point, particularly with the wonderful metaphor about the how the message has turned into a mirror of one's own beliefs as opposed to sometimes sharing beliefs. But I know that one of the things that drives you and also drives Dick Gephardt is how that mirror, in terms of digital media in particular, is not only shaping, or dare I say, misshaping our children and our communities and even our democracy. Now, Dick, I still have, it doesn't flow off the tongue as easily as Speaker Gephardt. But Dick, you did write the introduction and of this book, and you noted that you met Tim through the Bipartisan Council for Responsible Social Media. I'm sure our audience would love to know not only how that connection formed and why Tim's background was essential, but also a little bit about that council.
Absolutely. So about 5, 6 years ago, I began to really wonder what was happening in our democracy in America. I was in public service as a public servant for 35 years, starting in the St. Louis City Council and then moving to the House of Representatives. I ran for the Democratic nomination for president twice. Obviously, didn't succeed, but I had a wonderful career, and it was a career of service to the people. What I was worried about was that when I was in public service, we had all the controversies, we had all the issues you have today, but people were able to disagree without becoming hateful toward one another. In other words, they could disagree agreeably. And I really began to wonder what's happened. Why do so many people have hate for people they disagree with or that they think are not in their tribe or whatever? And so I began to talk to a lot of really smart people who knew a lot more about social media than I did. I'm an old guy. I've never been on social media. I didn't really know how it worked or what was happening. And from that series of conversations, I decided that we had to set up some kind of organization, of a bipartisan organization, a volunteer organization that could start working for solutions to the problems. I also learned that it was threatening the lives of children, which Tim just talked about, and that in addition, it, in my view, was threatening our ability to continue with self-government in the United States or anywhere. And so we pulled this group together. I actually met Tim at a forum in, I think, Naples, Florida. And
Yeah.
I had not known him before, but I was so impressed with his background, with his intelligence, with his knowledge, his experience, that I immediately thought he should be on the council because, as you know, most information systems are supported by advertising. That's how they are able to produce the content or to run their platform. So I thought he'd be ideal, and he agreed to come on. He's brought on 3 or 4 of his friends who he worked with in the past, and they've been fabulous members of the council. We're trying to do 2 things at once. We're trying to bring about some governmental, really minor regulation of the way social media operates so that it can be held liable for harm that comes from content that they amplify or they boost to their users. You got to have freedom of speech. We all understand that. And when I voted for Section 230 back in the day, in the mid 90s, and the platforms came to us at the time and said, "We're just a dumb pipe. We don't produce any content. Maybe the people should be liable, but not us. We're just a conduit." And they also said, "You'll never have an internet economy unless you hold us harmless from harm that could happen from content on our platform." So we all voted for it, most of us. And we didn't know then about algorithms. We didn't know about AI. We didn't know about scraping their data every minute of every day. We didn't know about algorithms to boost information. So Tim has been a huge help. And to me, he's an American hero because he had a very successful career. He could just enjoy his retirement, play golf or whatever, but that's not Tim. He's a patriot. He cares about the country. He cares about children. And that's why he's doing all that he's doing. And that's why he wrote this book.
So eloquently, and you make a subject that can be quite daunting and quite difficult to maneuver, make it seem quite clear. I hope that we will come back to Section 230 because that might be at the heart of some of these issues. You mentioned Tim, and you mentioned algorithms. Let me just go back to you, to Tim for 1 minute. You've said that algorithms don't just curate information, they condition behavior. So, how is that affecting children online? And I know you're quite passionate about this, and you've been involved with many of the parents who have had unfortunate situations with their children. So, just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, let me step back for a little bit. The change in dynamic that happened with the internet was around 2010, 2014. The psychologist and author of The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt, has written about this as a kind of watershed time for the internet. And I certainly experienced that from an advertising standpoint and seeing how the medium changed and how it became a more effective tool for our advertisers. And I was privileged to have worked with some of the largest advertisers in the world, as you know, Deborah, but your viewers may not. And Procter and Gamble was a wonderful client, and J&J and Nissan and Mars and a whole bunch of others, and they chased me all over the world. So I had the opportunity of learning about the effect that media has at different stages in different countries and different cultures. And it was a real revelation. But in 2010, 2014, we had the like, share, and retweet functions. And for the viewers that don't realize, to hit like and share or retweet on your computer, you have to have a physical motion, a physical action, and that physical action requires a different function of your brain. than a verbal commitment because it's including, I can say yes to you, but if I have to put an X on a spot or I have to hit my computer, that decision becomes more intransigent in your mind. It calcifies because it's a physical gesture in addition to the mental one. So that was a fundamental uh, watershed moment for the internet, but also for the advertising industry because we could then start actually following somebody's interests and their behavior. Whereas prior to that, we weren't sure what we were reading with the internet. And all we had was some secondary research to go on about people's intent and what they thought and so forth. But this was hard data that said they're sharing this idea, they're sending this idea to their brother and uncle. And that means that idea is that they've embraced it and it's become important to them. We'll send them, figure out a way to send them more information that interests them. And for the advertising industry, that said, holy cow, I can talk to somebody who I know is interested in my field or my brand or my product, and I can try to engage them and try to sustain that engagement for as long as possible. Because the longer you stay engaged to my content, the more efficient that content is, the more efficient the cost to do that is. And that revolutionized the advertising business. We now have, it's hard for some people that grew up in my generation to realize that about 65% of our communication information now is done over the internet digitally, that media like television, radio, and print is only about 35% of our consumption. So we've really changed how we deliver content to ourselves. And it's very much a physical and mental decision, which makes it more permanent and concrete. And that's done, I remember I was an art major, not an accountant or an engineer. So when I heard about algorithms, I wanted to learn about them and I wanted to understand what was happening. So I was privileged to work at Omnicom Group, and Omnicom had a variety of media companies, and it also had a variety of digital companies. And I went and I talked to these people, and I said, tell me what's happening." And they said, "Well, one thing that's happening is we're no longer buying media and placing it by sitting down at a table and discussing it face to face. It can be done by machine, by computer, and the computer reads the code, which is an algorithm of interest. And if it's revolutionized things because the way they explained it to me, they said if it's too expensive to reach people with conventional media who are interested in making sugar cookies, they like to bake sugar cookies. Well, if that's something that they like to do, there may be a whole bunch of other people, but it's hard. They're never going to be together. They're never going to be in an audience together. But the internet enables you to put that audience together and to aggregate it into, while you're still speaking one to one, it's a much larger audience. It was called the long tail. And this helped advertisers scale all kinds of product categories, as well as the big ones that they had before, but they could deliver messages much more specifically suited to the interests of the target they were going to. And that was a big change for our industry, and it's a big what I was wanting to study over the last 8 years is the change that it's meant for consumers and children. And on children, it's been a very radical change because the medium is the mirror also means that it's able to affect the way you think because it is a different medium. And what's happening is children are being exposed to content and ideas that their learning process hasn't progressed far enough along to do. And the other aspect of this is the attention arresting character of the medium of the internet. And so it has some profound effects. It has some very positive things that it's done for the world. Marshall McLuhan coined the phrase the global village, and what he meant was that the media, as it connects people, reshapes the world and makes it smaller. And that's certainly happened. But we now have an issue where the content that's driven to you is driven by a profit motive without a security motive in play. And it's having some negative repercussions, particularly on children. The suicide among adolescents is now the number two cause of death in our country. And we lead the world in terms of where that stacks up in terms of death adolescents, and that's troubling to me, and it should be troubling to all of us. Enough said.
No, you make a tragic point, and I think people haven't yet fully understood how the algorithms can influence behavior in young people. Yet I know that there are, just to put a balance on it, I know that there are some brands, and I really must do a shout out to Dove, whose Real Beauty
Yes.
campaign is recognizing that these algorithms are distorting what young women think of as being classically beautiful, and they're doing a lot to force people not, to override the algorithms by saying, no, that's not real beauty. I'm a picture of real beauty, or whatever it is. It's quite wonderful to see that evolution for a brand like that. Yet at the same time, it is a very difficult situation that should be addressed as quickly as possible. That's only one. And
Yeah, I
Dick,
think
if I was go ahead. I was just going to segue because I know that you're passionate about two things, both the children and also the broader consequences for democracy itself and some polarization we see. And I thought that Dick would be terrific just to talk about those broader consequences of misinformation and how they could indeed threaten democracy. Dick, would you talk to us about that, please?
Sure. So let me start this with a little human history. When we were early humans, we were no longer chimpanzees. We were early humans. Uh, we came to dominate the earth over much larger, more powerful species for two reasons. Number one, bigger brain. Number two, language. We invented language so we could communicate, which would allow us to work together to solve common problems. And so early humans, hunter gatherers, were able to be in tribes of about 100, and they would talk to one another, plan with one another, and then do their hunting and gathering in a much more efficient way, and then share the bounty with the whole tribe, children, old people, whatever. And that really was the way humans dominated on Earth. Um, then, many, many years later, and incidentally, the way people could determine what was pretty true or what was not true was because they began to know who they could trust in face to face communication, because that was the only way you could communicate. So that worked. You pretty well knew in your tribe who was not trustworthy, who was a liar, who would not give you valid information, and who would. So then came the printing press, as Tim said a minute ago, in 14 something. And that just upset the apple cart. Now I've got words on paper. I don't know who wrote these words. I don't know if I trust them or I don't. And it caused all manner of difficulty in the entire world as it spread across the world. There were witch hunts all over Europe that were caused by articles, posts, whatever you want to call it, that were done on the printing press, in newspapers or whatever they had to distribute that information. Then later, much later, it took 300 years or more to develop a profession called journalism. And so people began to be trained on how to report information that would be reliable, that would be trusted. And they became trusted reporters, and we had shared information, shared reality. It wasn't perfect. You had, some bad reporters, some bad journalists. You had people, companies that owned journalistic enterprises that didn't want people to have valid information. They wanted to put out disinformation, but it largely worked. And then that profession moved from newspaper print and the printing press to radio and then television, and that became cable. But the journalists tended to move from the newspaper business into those new modalities, and it pretty much worked. Now comes the internet. Now you've got 4 or 5 billion people who are reporters, who can speak, and very few of them have any training. Now, they can say anything they want. We have to have freedom of speech. So people post all manner of things that are true, things that are untrue, things that are somewhat true. It's just a potpourri of constant information from all these reporters, all these people. Now, the problem with that for democracy is that democracy, the main idea of democracy that our founders had in 1789, which was a long time after the printing press, their idea was that we could govern ourselves. It was the first time any country, any group of people in world history had decided that people could govern themselves. When Ben Franklin left Constitution Hall, where they were writing the Constitution, a crowd was outside and they said, "Mr. Franklin, have we decided to have a monarchy or a republic?" And he said, "We've decided to have a republic." And then he walked on, but then he turned around and came back and said, "We have a republic if we can keep it." We've been keeping it for 250 years as of next year. It's always fragile. It's always enormously difficult. I participated in it in Congress for 28 years as leader of the Democrats. And I can assure you that working together, as the early humans did, in a group of 535 people, which is what Congress is, to solve controversial issues that people really get riled up about is very difficult. But if there is no shared reality among the people, and on top of that, social platforms are using algorithms, I call it AI, to boost to people information, much of which can be totally false, totally disinformation, totally misinformation, to the point that they addict people to a whole set of information that they know, because they know everything about you if you're on the platform, will keep your attention because it will make you angry, anxious, upset, hateful, revengeful. then they make more money. I get it. I'm a capitalist. I want everybody to make money. But it's having an impact on our ability to govern ourselves. If the American people are as divided, and I believe they are today, as they were in 1860, we will no longer be able to govern ourselves because Congress is a reflection of the American people. That's what it is. It's self-government. And you hire people, you appoint people, you vote for people to represent your views. If you're in Congress today and you don't, let's say you want to make a compromise on some big controversial issue, which we did when I was in Congress repeatedly. It was hard, really hard, but we did it. We balanced the federal budget in 1999. It was the hardest thing I ever worked on. But if you did that today, you'd be kicked out in a second. People won't put up with that. So my worry is that not only is this new form of information environment that we're in threaten the lives of children who are drugged into suicide websites and are killing themselves as a result of the algorithm that's pumping to them 24/7, 365 information to encourage them to kill themselves. In addition to that harm, I think we're on the road to losing self-government as a means of governing people, not only in the United States, but all across the world. I think democracy is in trouble. And I think this issue, and it's what I said in my preface to the book, this issue is the most important issue of all the issues that we can talk about because it's foundational. It is elemental. And if we can't bring about some better solutions to it, if we can't have some alternative platforms to be competitors to the incumbents that are healthy platforms, that don't use those algorithms, that don't scrape your data every day, we're in big trouble. We are in big trouble. And that's why Tim and I and a bunch of other people work on this every day.
What you've said is just so sobering that it's very hard to react. And just because I think it takes a moment to digest it, not only in your gut, but in your head. Yet if one is to be an optimist, I think one, which is very difficult today, you've mentioned one potential solution, and that's other platforms that could be competitive without using the same kind of algorithms. Let me ask you both then. I know that part of Tim's book is that both regulation and responsibility should come together, must work together to give us some form of hope that there can be progress. I'd like you both to just comment on any other ways that you see forward to break through this. Would you like to continue, Dick? I mean, you
Sure.
didn't want to lose that energy. My goodness, I have to. Everyone needs a moment of silence now. You know.
No, I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I really am. We have to do this. The only thing that's daunting to me is that it took us 300 years to figure out how to tame the printing press. So we don't have 300 years. We may have 30 months or something to figure out the answer to the internet. But we can do it. There are two legislative solutions that at CRSM we're working on every day. One is Section 230 amendment, which I talked a little about, and we can describe more. The platforms are the only industry in the country that are not regulated with regard to harm at all. The car industry, the airplane industry, the steel, everybody is subject to being sued if they harm people. Not this industry. They're home free. They can do whatever they want. They got a free pass, and that's got to end. And I think the way to do it, and the way we're talking about doing it, we've got great lawyers working on this, is to say you're exempt for information that you don't put on, that somebody else puts on, but you're not exempt for information that's boosted or amplified by your algorithmic behavior. That's your affirmative behavior that is causing harm to people. Let me give you an example. We have mothers on the council whose kids killed themselves. Let me give you one anecdote. The mother said she had a 14-year-old boy. He came to her one day with his phone and he said, "Look at this. This is funny." She said, "What is it?" He said, "It's the choke challenge." She said, "Don't get involved in that. That sounds dangerous." He said, "Oh, I never would. I just thought it was funny." 6 days later, she finds him hanging from his belt in the garage, dead. He took the choke challenge. Now, how did that work? What happened was he went on the internet, was asking questions about being depressed, about having eating disorders, about wanting to cut himself, wanting to harm himself. The algorithm immediately sensed that, realized, boy, we can keep this kid's attention. We can addict him to information about how to really harm himself. And it worked. Now you've got stories of chatbots with AI that befriend kids, and the kids start talking about being depressed, etc., and they bring them to the point that they decide to kill themselves. So this activity is known by the leaders of these platforms. They know what they are doing. They've been told repeatedly by their own safety committees, members of which are now on our council. They've warned them that they're hurting children, and they won't change the algorithm because they're making so much money, and they want these kids to be their future customers. So we've got to pass that. We also have another legislative solution called the Kids Online Safety Act that protects kids, not as much as, in my view, as an amendment to Section 230, but it allows kids to declare they want privacy, they don't want their data scraped, blah, blah, blah. There's a duty of care in the bill on the platforms to not harm children. So all of that would be positive. But beyond those two, there's privacy legislation that everybody ought to have. There's transparency legislation to make the platforms show you their algorithms and how they're operating. So there's a lot of other things that could be done. We've had real trouble getting any of these things done because the platforms have more money than God. They've hired every lobbyist in DC. And every time we get close, as we did with the Kids Online Safety Act, to actually getting something done, they just tear us apart. I always say to the group, we're David, they're Goliath. And we just got to keep pounding away to try to get it done. So put that aside. The other solution, which I think is equally important, if not more important, is to get healthy alternative competitors out there for people to choose if they will choose it. At the end of the I know that's hard to believe, and it's hard for me to say it, but the ultimate solution to this problem is the people. But if they don't have alternatives, they never get out of the what we call a walled garden that they're in with these platforms.
some wonderful points, and I also think that we're seeing some positive things. With, for example, certain places are now restricting phones in schools, and that's having a very positive effect.
Absolutely.
But
Let me on
yeah,
that.
please.
Go ahead, Sid. On that point, I was at an event last night in Wilmington, Delaware, at the University of Delaware, Newark, Delaware. And one of the professors on technology was sitting next to me at the dinner. And I asked him about this trend of trying to take the phones away from kids, at least during class time. And he said, we tried and they just wouldn't have it. They would not do it. They would quit the university.
Those are adults. I thought maybe we'd start with kids at a
Well,
younger
yeah.
age who might be a little bit
Well,
more
yeah.
flexible. You never
Yeah.
you never
Yeah.
know. Um,
Exactly. But that shows
That's a
you
great,
how we've addicted people. This is an addiction. Kids are on their phone 7 hours a day. They never
No, I
talk
know.
to anybody.
It's really too much. Well, look, let me just quickly ask you then. I think that we're going to have a series of these because some of the topics we haven't even really dug beneath the surface. So I think a series might be a good idea, and maybe I'll set that up on each different category. But let's just in closing for now, and it's a lot of information to take in, but if you both would leave our viewers in the marketing community with one takeaway, what would it be? Do you want to start, Dick?
Well, I'm not from the ad business. I don't have background and knowledge like Tim and his colleagues do, but I would say this. It would seem to me that companies that are advertising, and I think advertising is a fabulous industry. It does a lot of good. It helps people know about things that they want to know about, that they need to know about. But I would think that advertisers would really be concerned about having their ads on a platform or next to other actions by those platforms that are harming children, harming our ability to be a democracy, which we all understand has ginormous benefits for the American people. So my hope is that, and Tim gives me hope because he's a great product of that industry. He had a great career. He knows so many people that he can work within the community and try to get them to help us try to correct this situation. And they have enormous influence because that's where the money comes from. These platforms are just ad companies. That's all they are. They like TV stations or radio stations or newspapers. They have to have advertising. And they have corralled more money than anybody has ever thought of that you could get from advertising. So the advertisers have tremendous leverage in helping to correct this situation.
And a final word.
I guess there's three things I would say to my colleagues in the advertising business that I would want to leave them with, and I'm still learning about all this. But the first thing is something that I said to I was once asked to give a 2-minute summary of the advertising industry in the region of Asia Pacific, India, Middle East, and Africa to Timothy Geithner, who was visiting Singapore. And in the 2 minutes that I had, I emphasized that the American advertising industry has been the envy of the world because it has enabled people through various media to enjoy entertainment, knowledge, communication at and with free speech at a very efficient use of that. It's enabled us to have a faster growth of television, radio, and print because of advertising. And I've worked in other countries where their media is controlled by the government or isn't as well supported by advertising. So I think what we have here is very precious and important. And the solutions to these problems have been done before by our industry. Every communication technology that's ever happened has had some abuses at the beginning. And if you study it and you go back, and hopefully my book will shed some light on this for people who are interested. But our industry's always had challenges, and we've faced them, and we should be going to school on what we did. And what is different, there's three things that are different that are important. One is that the media and information system that we have today is more centralized and more controlled by fewer players than we've ever had before in our history. More than when Hearst had the newspapers and the magazines, more than when the three networks dominated information in America in the 50s and 60s and 70s. This is far more concentrated and far more powerful. And it's not just big tech. The way that I think about it is it's a potential technopoly. And the industry must not back away from taking a lead and protecting their customers because of the ramifications of not falling in line with the technopoly. The second thing is that this idea of becoming more aware of how the medium is a mirror and helping people understand that the information that they're seeing that they get so upset about or so elated about is by design becoming more focused on reflecting their identity and their biases. So it's harder to see a broader objective view of what is reality because the reality that you're seeing, and it's all of us, the reality that we're seeing is an echo chamber of our identity and our biases. The third thing that I would want people to understand, and I've just started this with the book, is that when we communicate, like we're communicating now on video, and it's not perfect. It's not like being there in the same room together where we can read each other's eyes and see expressions a lot better and see if you're discomforted by what I'm saying. But this video Zoom is what I would call is synchronous communication because it's going back and forth and it's fluid. But we have just shifted the bulk of our communication from synchronous communication to asynchronous communication, which means written, typed, or text. 65% of our communication today is written, typed, or text. And that doesn't have the information and the use of the brain that face-to-face communication has. It's a hell of a lot more lonely. And I think loneliness is the biggest disease on the planet. But we have to become more aware of the ramifications of asynchronous communication in terms of our perceptions and our definition of what truth is and what is real, because it's far more manipulatable than it's ever been in the history of our species. So there's going to be more on this, and I ask for more research to be done. I ask for more challenge on this idea, but we are using more typing and texting, and that biases us in ways that is not healthy. And I think the advertising industry has a penultimate role in leading this, and we must not be afraid. It's the other thing is that it's commercial speech that we're talking when we support it with advertising. People say, well, this is a free speech thing because people should be able to say what they want to say. I am a huge believer in free speech. I went all over the world launching brands and seeing the benefits of free speech, but I also saw the benefits of responsible advertising and responsible content. And I saw the disadvantages of irresponsible content and disinformation and propaganda. And what we are playing with here in this country right now is very dangerous because we've left our information systems wide open for foreign and domestic disinformation tactics. The average consumer hears that and thinks that it's Tim's talking about a conspiracy theory. I'm not. It's wide open. It's wide open because Section 230 negates the platform from monitoring it and being responsible for it. So I don't have all the answers yet. I hope this book will help advance the discussion and get people talking about it because we're playing with fire here and we're playing with something that is like the family jewels for America.
Well,
Can I add?
Please go ahead.
Can I add just one last word here? I'm so in admiration of Tim and his colleagues who are working on this, because let's understand what's at stake here. The founders of the country wrote a constitution that embodied 4 things that has allowed America to be the best and wealthiest economic country in the history of the world. What are those things? Democracy, freedom, rule of law, and capitalism. Advertising is at the heart of that economic success. There are 8 billion people in the world. Roughly half of them live on $2 a day. The average per capita income in the United States today is $80,000 a year. That's why everybody wants to come here. This is the shining city on the hill. And our friends who created this country did marvelous work, and advertising is at the heart of our capitalist success. And so having great people like Tim and his colleagues working to bring about solutions, part of which will come from the advertising community, is simply fabulous.
Nicely said. Although I think we're left with a bit of an unsettled stomach and a lot of questions to answer. We're not giving up optimism, but certainly a lot to consider, a lot to think about, a lot to read in this book, which is an extraordinary look at the evolution of this and perhaps some of the solutions. And again, let me thank you both for the passion and the time and the belief that you have to try to do good, on this very subject. So thank you. And let's leave it as to be continued.
To be continued. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The Internationalist focuses on the continual reinvention of marketing by highlighting inspirational marketers around the world and their ideas as they move the industry forward. Internationalist Marketing TV shares these perspectives through interviews and personal stories. Thanks so much for watching. If you find this kind of content helpful, please click like or subscribe. Again, thanks so much.